Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultants channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant, and today I am going to go over the cost of being homeless. Specifically my cost in my situation living in a car in the great state of Minnesota. You've probably heard me say several times in many videos that it is more expensive for me now living in that car than it was when I had a home. Today I'm going to show you what I meant by that. If you recall, I don't know how long ago, I just don't know how long ago, 2 years ago, it was when Tim Walz had his stay-at-home order, where the homeless can't stay at home because they don't have a home. When I called that attorney and I did the brief video about that attorney, this guy's resume talks about how he's a human rights attorney. And this bozo, he puts me on hold for a minute, probably put on a recorder, and then he asked me just a couple of questions, like, how much do you make? And immediately shut me down and said, you make plenty of money, you shouldn't be homeless. And he just starts reaming me a new one. So I made the video pointing out that for this guy to be regarded as a professional, let alone as educated or intelligent, it's a real insult for someone who has spent his entire life learning every single day, even 6 years living in a car. That attorney didn't know what he was talking about. Absolutely oblivious. Well, and he apparently was osteophobic as well. Hates the homeless. That's Minnesota's idea of human rights. This chart here, I just want to point out that everything I'm about to go through in this chart, and there's a lot of stuff in here, that attorney didn't ask a single question that even started to look in the direction of anything in this chart. When I'm done with it, you're going to see exactly why the amount of money I make doesn't mean anything, even though I'm not going to tell you how much I make, but it just doesn't matter. Let me put it this way, I make less than I did at my job when I had a home. That attorney did not even ask any of the questions that will be answered in this chart today. And if that's what people, if that's how easy people think it is to get out of homelessness, and they think that just because you have a job, oh, you must have just rolling in the dough. I'm sorry, that attorney was an idiot. Okay, and if he wants to take me to court for saying that, go for it. I'll prove that he's an idiot. I don't know. Folks, I have absolutely had it with people using these heuristics, these rules of thumb. I would have used this thumb, but of course, as you know, in the car, I lost the use of that thumb by having that piece of metal jammed in my back all the time. Something I'm sure that attorney knew, right? Because he didn't bother to ask any questions at all. I've really had it with people making assumptions that just because you don't have a place to live, you must be this, that, or the other thing. It just isn't true. And I'm going to show you a big part of the reason why it isn't true here with this chart. The battery's about to go out in this camera, so let me plug in the handheld recorder. Again, I hope the sound quality is okay for you folks, but look at the bright side, you don't have to see my pretty face for the rest of the video. Thanks for watching. Okay, I have plugged in the handheld recorder and hopefully the sound quality is okay. The first thing I want to mention here is that the expenses I'm going to show you in this chart are the expenses that have really changed. I'm not going to talk about things that really stayed the same from when I was in the apartment to living in the car. Things like renewing your driver's license and plates and the cost of haircuts and windshield wipers, things like that. There's no point to that. What I want to show you is the dramatic change in expenses and the scale and the scope of the shift. Now, in order to do this, the first thing I'm going to show you is kind of an introductory part of this chart. In my chart, it's in the middle. If you look at this, what it's doing is it's showing you the year broken down into months, weeks, and specifically into hours. So over on the left, you can see where it's, per week, per month, per year, and the number of hours that are in a week, a month, and a year. The next column over, it says work, sleep, productive time, unproductive time. Now, obviously, work is where you're at work, and I just put in 40 hours. I'm going to have to do a lot of rounding in this thing. I'll try to tell you when I'm doing it, but obviously, when you go to work, you also have the time that it takes to get ready for work and to drive there, to drive back. I'm just putting in the hours at work. As far as sleep goes, I'm assuming 8 hours of sleep a day in the apartment. That's not accurate for me. It kind of sort of is, but I was always somebody who napped. I probably did nap about 8 hours a day, but I didn't necessarily sleep it all at once. Productive time is the time when you're not sleeping and you're not working. In other words, that's time where you can do something productive. You can learn, you can research, you can create, you can invent, you can entertain others, you can go and be entertained, you can go out with friends, you can build friendships, you can date. That is productive time. That's time where you're doing something for yourself. And yeah, sometimes that might even be just sitting around vegetating, playing video games. But it is not something like watching television. Watching television is a true vegetative state in every sense of the word. I mean, just look at the research on that and what it does to your brain. So, even when I watch a movie, I'm studying how the movie's made, the cinematography, the editing, the special effects, the screenwriting, the acting. I mean, even that is productive for me. So, in this chart, what you see is that the unproductive time, which would be, for example, if I did sit around watching television, I haven't watched television since 1996. And I don't dink around, doing things that are pointless. Now, granted, every once in a while, yeah, there probably are times that you get depressed or something, or just exhausted. But, this is an all things being equal chart. What else can I do? I can't go into that kind of detail. So what you see there is that in the left column of numbers, that's when I was in the apartment. And notice, when I was in the apartment, I worked 40 hours a week. I slept 8 hours a day is what I'm putting in there. I didn't have any unproductive time because all I did when I was at home was productive stuff. I was reading, I was writing, I was creating, I was learning, I was researching. I was always productive. I can't not be productive with my time. That is human torture. And as you're about to see, that's one reason why being homeless is human torture. Now, as you get into the month, you see the number of hours, but if you get down to the year, notice one thing. My productive time in the apartment was greater than the amount of time that I slept. Much, much greater. It was also much, much greater than the time that I spent at work, working full time. And keep in mind also, I'm not counting vacations and such. At my job when I was in the apartment, I had 3 weeks of vacation plus personal days, basically a month off. Now I have 2 weeks of vacation and a couple of personal days, and I really don't even use the vacation. I only use the personal days. Now, if you look at that, though, the main thing to notice is the zero unproductive time. Now let's add a column for what the numbers are as I've been living in the car. Now work is the same, 40 hours a week. But look at the sleep. The sleep is down there. It's not half as much as before, but it's getting awful close. What I put in there was 8 hours a day when I'm in the hotel. That's 2 nights where I can sleep a normal shift, you might say. But on the other 5 nights when I'm in the car, the average is about 4 hours of sleep. There are some nights when I get no sleep at all. It's exceedingly rare. Exceedingly rare that I could ever conceivably get 7 or 8 hours of sleep, just because somebody will interrupt me if I tried. So 4 hours average. That's 20 hours less sleep a week than I got when I was in my apartment. Now, if you know anything about sleep deprivation and the impact that that has on people, you're going to get your first understanding of why homeless people have a little bit of difficulty getting out of it versus you, the comfortable, well-slept, housed person. The next one to look at is productive time. Now, productive time in this case is only when I'm in the hotel. And it's only when I'm in the hotel and I'm not sleeping and when I'm not pulling everything out of my car and setting up, which takes a good hour, and when I'm breaking everything down and leaving, which takes about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, shower, all that. Look at the productive time. When I was in my apartment every week, I got 72 hours of productive time living in my car, and I only get that day and a half I'm in the hotel, I get 28 hours of productive time. Now look at the unproductive time. 64 hours every single week. These are the hours when I'm sitting in that car just sweating and constantly having to move the car. Sometimes I have to move the car every 5 or 10 minutes because as soon as I pull in somewhere, some creepy weirdo or drug addict or the police or something happens to chase me out of there. Now, yes, I do things like record these videos in the car, so again, I'm rounding off here. I guess you would call that productive. I guess I would call that productive. But the fact is, when I'm not recording that, I have to pretty much, for the most part, get into the hotel before I can edit it and upload it. There isn't a whole lot I can do in that car. I can't do things in the car. What am I supposed to do? Graphic design? I mean, with a laptop sitting literally against my steering wheel and my mouse falling off my leg every 2 or 3 times that I touch it. No, the time in that car is not remotely productive. It is human torture. And for someone who, as you can see in the left column, when he was able to, was productive every moment of the waking day, every day, living in that car has been human torture for me. Totally unproductive. Go down to the part where it says per year now and look at those numbers. Unproductive time when I was in the apartment, 0. Unproductive time when I'm living in the car, 3,328 hours every year. That's 3,300 hours that I'm just sitting twiddling my thumbs, trying not to get arrested, trying not to get killed, trying not to get harassed by housed people, trying not to have creepy Minnesotans come up and point their car at me with their headlights on and stare at me, or walking in front of my car with their camera to film the homeless guy sitting in his car so they can put it on the internet. That's what I'm doing for those 3,300 hours. My productive time for the entire year, 1,456 hours. Less than half the productive time I had when I was in my home. But keep in mind, those 1,456 hours are, for what it's worth, all when I'm in the hotel. And that's not entirely productive. Don't forget, we've got all the gangbangers and creepy, nasty creatures we've got in this hotel, It's not the easiest thing to get something done here either. But I wanted to show you this part of the chart first because it's very important, and that these numbers are going to be part of the calculations when we get into the dollar amounts. I can't emphasize enough to look at this chart and realize that this is the chart for someone who lives in a car and has a full-time job. Now try to imagine a chart like this for someone who lives in a ditch or under a bridge or in a tent. What do you think their productive hours are? Folks, if you wonder why people remain homeless, maybe it's because they are homeless in the first place. All of your options, everything you used to know, the entire life you used to know, is instantly gone. And by the time you spend several months learning how to live that way, you're past the point of no return. And a lot of those people, they respond to that by going into a bottle or grabbing a needle. And then house people look at them and complain about them being, quote, all just a bunch of lazy bums, a bunch of alcoholics and drug addicts. That's all they are. Sorry, folks. Many, if not most, of the homeless people pick up those habits after they're homeless, because there's nothing out there to help them get out of it in the first several weeks or several months when they become homeless. All there is social services and government agencies that exploit them, take advantage of them, profit from their misery. So that's the first part of the chart. Now we're going to go up and we're going to look at what my main expenses were. So again, let's just look at the column for my apartment. Up at the top, you see my monthly rent. Now, I got really, really lucky, I'll admit. My rent, for most of the time I lived in that apartment, I was there for 7-8 years, it was $600 a month, which is incredible. It really was. For that place, it was a great place. I mean, the location, the setup, it was a great, other than those neighbors who made my life a living hell, who tortured and tormented me all the time inside my home, the place itself was as good as I could ever hope for. It was a dream come true, especially at $600 a month. About a year or maybe two before, I lost the place, he had to raise the rent by $20 because of taxes. No other reason. Meanwhile, every month I had to pay, now this is a little tricky to explain, but I had to pay storage the whole time I've lived in Minnesota. I'm paying storage in California because, frankly, everything I've built in my whole life before I moved to Minnesota has been sitting in California for the last 15 years. When I left California, it was $80 a month. By the time I lost my home here in Minnesota and started living in the car, they had jacked it up to $140, more, almost twice what it was before. So if you add those two together, you get $760 a month just for rent. That's for storage in California and the rent on my apartment. So if you run that out through the year, you get an annual rent for the apartment of $7,440, and then the annual storage rental was $1,680. So the total I was paying for rent throughout the year for storage and apartment for the whole year, $9,120. And that ain't bad. Anything I find now is going to be more like $1,100, not $620. And if you don't understand that part of this equation, you're missing a lot of the reason why I haven't slipped into a home. Not all of it. There was actually one place I saw that was comparable in price to this, but that's not the only reason I can't get a place. Next, look at where it says the number of hours I was housed. Okay, so obviously the number of days I was housed was 364. It was the whole year. How many hours is that? It's 8,736 hours. Now go down to below that. This is only for my rent on my apartment, not the storage. When you do the math on that, you find out that what I was paying Remember, that's the $7,440 a year. That means that my rent that I was paying each day was $20.44. It means that every hour I was in that apartment, I was paying 85 cents for rent. Now, because I was housed there all the time, all year, my rent per housed hour was also 85 cents. Next is the rent per productive hour. Remember, productive hour is what matters, because if you're not productive, you're a vegetable. You're not doing anything with your life. Why are you even bothering to remain alive? I'm not like that. I have always been productive, especially since I stopped watching TV more than 20 years ago now. So each productive hour when I lived in the apartment cost me $1.99 for each hour that I was productive. Now, by the same token, since I was not unproductive in that apartment, there was no cost. My rent per unproductive hour was zero, because that's a moot point. I didn't sit there and vegetate in front of a TV. I didn't stare at an idiot box. I didn't have the internet at home. Okay, I just didn't do that. I was always doing something, always learning, creating, researching, moving forward, or I was out of there and I was, with other people. I was doing, the things that people do, even thrift shopping, even that could be considered productive. Now, let's add a column for the numbers here when I'm living in the car. Now, the math here is a little tricky because there isn't a monthly rent on this hotel. What there is basically an $80 a day. I'm rounding again, but $80 a day. And because I'm there 2 days a month, there's some months where I'm there maybe one more day, because just the way that the dates at the beginning and the end of the month fall. So what I did was I did the calculations to see what the average was for an average month, and it comes out to $694 even. That's $74 more a month than I spent on my apartment. And yet, I'm only in there 8 days a month, sometimes 9. But I'm paying almost $75 more than I did for my apartment. And my apartment was a nice big place with closet space and a kitchen and a bathroom, and I had pets, and I had privacy. I didn't have people who just spent the last 5 years getting raped in a prison 6 feet on the other side of the wall like I do in this dumpy hotel. But I'm paying more for this place. My monthly storage rental. All right, take a look at this. That storage place in California has continued to jack the price up. I now pay $200 a month. Remember, when I moved here 15 years ago, it was $80 a month. Now I pay $200 a month. Why do I keep that storage place? Because it has my entire life up until I was about 40 years old. That's why. It has everything I have to remember my family by. And I want it back. That's why I've paid tens of thousands of dollars to maintain that over the last 15 years. That's all I have to remember my life, my upbringing, my family. And I may never see it again. But not only that, but I've had to get a storage facility here for all of my stuff. That is $80 a month, just like it was in California when it started. Let's see if they start jacking that one up too. When you add those together, you get $280 a month just for storage. And the mass of it is in California. I can't even see any of that stuff. In fact, it's probably filled with rattlesnakes and scorpions by now. If you add that up, you get every month what I'm spending on rent, which is this dumpy, crappy, filthy, rotten hotel and both storage facilities. I'm spending $974 versus $760 that I spent when I lived in the apartment. Are you starting to see a pattern here? If you Carry that out for the year, you get, for rent only, just rent for this hotel, this dump, $8,328. For storage, $3,360 each year. Add those together, you get $11,688 every year as I live in a car that I am spending to spend basically less than 2 days a week in a hotel and for storage. Compare that to the $9,120 I paid when I was in the apartment. And in the apartment, I had laundry, I had closet space, I had parking, I had security entrances. I had everything. I had electricity, I had space, I had carpet, I had a vacuum cleaner, I had a kitchen, a bathroom, a bathtub, a shower. I had my beloved pets. I had an office. I had a music studio. That I had for $9,120. To sit in a car and sweat and to dodge Minnesotans and police, I pay $11,688 every year. So the number of days that I'm housed, and the way I had to calculate this, because you check in, you stay for a certain number of hours, and then it's midnight, and then you're there for a full day, and then the next day you check out in the morning. So keep in mind that I'm only in the hotel one complete day from midnight to midnight once every week. That's 52 times a year that I get to spend a full day in a place for all this money I'm spending. 52 times every year. You get to do it 364 times every year. But if you add in those half days before and after with check in and check out, it comes out by the hours to 95 days every year that I'm inside this dump. That translates to 2,288 hours. Now, let's go to the costs here. So what is the shelter rent cost? Again, this is only for shelter. This is not for storage. This is what I'm paying for this dumpy hotel. It's $22.88 a day. Now, that's per day. Remember, I'm not in here every day, but yet, even when I'm not here, those other 5 days, that's $22.88 on that day that goes toward me being in this dump on those 2 days, if you get what I mean. Okay, per hour. If you do the math per hour, that's 95 cents per hour throughout the entire year, 365 days. Every single hour, I'm paying 95 cents to stay in this hotel for basically a day and a half every week. That's 10 cents more than when I was in the apartment, with all the luxury I had there, all the privacy, all what should have been peace if it wasn't for my neighbors and this corrupt, incompetent, negligent state government that did nothing about those neighbors who cost me my home. So what is the rent per housed hour? In other words, what am I paying for each hour that I'm actually inside a place, this dump? $3.64. Every hour I'm in here, right now while I'm recording this, if it takes an hour to record this, that's $3.64 I'm paying. When I was in my apartment with all that luxury, with all that peace, with all that resources, it was my home, folks. It was 85 cents a day. How about productive hours? Remember, I can only be productive when I'm in the hotel, and not even all the time that I'm here. Not when I'm asleep, and not when I'm setting up and breaking down either. And frankly, I'm being generous with this because when you get all the gangbangers and the prisoners and all the welfare people who live here off my taxes all week long, while I can only be here for a day and a half, my productive time really isn't even as high as this chart says it is. But if you just average it out and assume that that's my productive time, each productive hour, each hour that I'm doing something productive, like recording this for you, costs me $5.72 every hour, folks. Imagine if every hour that you are productive, you had to run down to Starbucks and buy a mocha latte and tip them. Every single hour of your productive life. That's what it cost me, being homeless. But look what it was when I was in my apartment, $1.99. Now look at the unproductive hours. Remember when I was in the apartment, I didn't have unproductive time because I don't vegetate. I do something with my life. I always have, from the time I was a child. Yes, I got hooked on the TV pretty young, and I did watch a lot of TV, but since 1996, I've been free, folks. Every moment of the waking day has been productive. The unproductive time for me, when I'm just sitting there sweating, fighting off mosquitoes, dodging these creepy Minnesotans who just want to stalk me and they want to intimidate me. They don't like me parking somewhere, so they come up and they park right in front of me with their headlights on, and they just stare, and the police are coming up checking my ID because my car's all rusty, but they don't check the drug dealer's car right next to me because he's got a nice shiny new car. All the time I'm doing that idiocy, $2.50 every hour. That's what it's costing me to be tortured like that. So I hope you can see from just these numbers alone, it cost me a lot more living in this car than it did when I had a home. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this chart one more time, but this time I'm going to consider we're going to base it off of the amount of money I spent on rent and the storage, not just rent. You know, before I was talking about rent on the apartment only or rent for this dumpy hotel only. Now we're going to look at what the numbers are for what I actually really truly do pay for, quote, rent. Rent on the place I'm staying at and 1 or 2 storage facilities. Look at what's going on now. When I was in my apartment, every day basically cost me $25.05. So of the money I made in my paycheck, every day I had to allocate $25.05 to pay my rent for my apartment and my California storage. The rent per day, every day, 24 hours, that I needed to allocate to pay for all that was $1.04. The rent per housed hour, because I was always housed, it was my home, was the same, $1.04. The amount of money that I had to allocate to pay for productive time in that apartment, and remember, do you remember the numbers, how much productive time I had? 3,744 hours. More than the time I slept, more than the time I worked, almost more than those two combined. For each productive hour, I had to allocate $2.44. And then for unproductive time, 0, because I was not unproductive in my apartment, at least until my neighbors started torturing and terrorizing me. And, again, these numbers don't tell the whole story. For the last several years I was in that apartment, yeah, I was totally unproductive. I was curled up in a ball on the floor, where this government wouldn't do anything about it. Nothing. Which is why I live in a car today. So let's go to the next column where it shows the numbers for living in a car. The rent per day, the amount of money I have to allocate every day now for staying in this dumpy hotel and paying both of those storages, is $32.11 every single day. Now the rent per hour, each hour of my life, whether I'm at work or I'm asleep or I'm stuck vegetating in the car and dodging creeps or I'm sitting in this hotel, every single hour I have to allocate $1.34. That's 30 cents more than when I was in the apartment. Per hour. Doesn't sound like much of a difference, but that's per hour. What about rent per housed hour? Because I'm only housed for at most 44 hours a week instead of the entire week. 44 hours maximum, and that's if I get that many hours in this dumpy hotel. $5.11. This next one should tell you the main part of the story I'm trying to tell you. What is the rent that I'm paying per productive hour? for the last 6 years, as I'm stuck living in a car, how much does it cost me to have 1 hour of productive time? 1 hour where I can make a video like this. 1 hour where I can go out and research things or try to find a better job or try to do anything that's productive. 1 hour cost me $8.03. And folks, that's more than some people in America get paid every hour. Do you see the problem now? That's a significant portion of what I get paid an hour. And then when it comes to the unproductive hours, which I don't want to have, but I don't have a choice because I'm stuck just sitting in a car, freezing to death or sweating to death, $3.51. When you consider the amount I spend on this hotel and both storage facilities, each hour that I spend suffering in third world conditions inside that car cost me $3.51 for the privilege of suffering under that torture. And the state of Minnesota does nothing about it. Nothing. Did that human rights attorney in Minnesota, did he ask about any of this? No, folks, he didn't ask one single question that comes out of this chart. He had no conscious awareness of any of this. A homeless guy is better at discovering information than that clown is. And you know what? That guy's sleeping in a home tonight. And that's the problem we've got here. Now, the last section I want to show you here is just where I did my very best. These are rough numbers, I'll admit, very rough. But I spent a lot of time on this trying to get as close as I could to the truth and reality. These are the other expenses that I have that have changed dramatically. So let's look at when I was in the apartment. My annual electricity, don't ask me how I do it, folks, but again, I don't watch television and I don't waste time. I'm pretty frugal. My electricity cost me $264 a year, roughly. Each month I paid about $22 on my electric bill. Today, being in the car, I get my electricity by three basic means. I either plug something in at work, which isn't as easy as it sounds, because the stuff you plug in isn't the stuff that people normally plug in at work, and it would raise questions. I buy a ton of batteries, including those big, huge batteries that cost me, $100 for the fan. And then later I'll account for the gasoline. Much of it is from the power inverter that I plug into the car lighter, which runs off of the battery, which means the car has to run, which means gasoline is the ultimate energy source there. Now on this line, I'm only talking about batteries though. I'm not talking about gasoline because I don't have a way to separate out what the gasoline's going toward. I'm estimating on batteries alone about $400 a year versus $264 for full electricity in all the power outlets in my entire apartment, including air conditioner, which I don't have, by the way. I don't have an air conditioner or a heater in my car. Speaking of heat, let's look at the heat. Now, I had to separate heat out into two different parts because this is Minnesota. So you have the 6 months that is Minnesota winter, roughly, where I don't have a choice, folks. I have to run the car every moment I'm inside the car. And again, I don't even have a heater. I mean, that's to generate the trivial, itty-bitty amount of heat from the engine getting warm to try to get something into that car other than the wind that's blowing through the holes in the car. When I was in my apartment, heat was paid. I didn't have to pay for heat. By my estimate, the amount of money that I spend on gasoline just to run the car when I'm not even moving, plus the hand warmers that I have to buy. Remember, I have to put hand warmers all over my body in the winter to try not to get frostbite, blankets, things like that. I estimate it to be around $2,160 each year for heat. generated by those ridiculous means. And again, those are only on the days I'm not in the hotel. Okay, that's why it says 134.5 days per 6 months. The days I'm in the hotel is already accounted for in the hotel cost. That's how much I spend on the days I'm not in the hotel. Now on the other 6 months where it's, the week of spring and the week of fall and then just nothing but a heat wave for the summer, again, I'm estimating big time here, but I've kept enough track of it. I think this is relatively close. Again, $0 when I was in the apartment, heat was paid, but I pay about $753 for gasoline, mainly because as winter ends, I have to run the car, but not necessarily all day, and that winds down until it gets hot, and then it gears up again later. But also, sometimes it's just so hot that I have to drive around trying to chase shade. So next, let's look at gasoline, and this is for transportation. This is for what most people use gasoline for, which is for transportation. They don't use it for heat and to try to stay alive. And don't forget, the whole time I'm running that car, I'm breathing in all those fumes. That's why my singing voice is gone forever. Those deadly fumes. The fumes, if you do a Google search or look through newspapers, every year, countless, not just homeless people, but even many house people die in their cars from those very fumes that I'm exposed to all the time. And every year I'm exposed to more of them because there's more and more holes coming into the car that allow those gases to get in when you run a car for 16 hours a day, like I will start having to do about a month from now. For transportation to work when I was in my apartment, now granted, I was very lucky. I lived pretty close to work. But, also the grocery store was in between, so I didn't have to make a special trip for groceries in most cases. My transportation to work over the year was around $1,500 for gas. That is based on the price of gas at that time, average. Living in the car, given where I have to try to go to sleep, the amount of money I spend on gas annually, just traveling to and from work only, for no other purpose than to get to work and to get there on time, about $2,184. And that's, of course, at a higher price of gas. You might have noticed, since the last president of the United States was overthrown, the price of gas has gone up a bit. But even then, I'm just taking an average of what I've had to deal with. All right. Then you have gasoline costs for other transportation. That's when you're shopping. That's when you're entertaining yourself. That's when you're going out to wash your car. That's just when you're going out. It's when you're going out to do things, to sightsee or whatever it is you're doing. When I was in the apartment, again, I'm estimating probably around $520 that I spent on gas for that purpose. Now, because I have to constantly run the car to get away from the police, to get away from creepy Minnesotans, stalkers, all kinds of weirdos everywhere, it's about $1,500. I put $1,560 based on my calculations. That's for going out and getting food. For what it's worth, entertainment I don't really have. I don't have travel. I mean, this is just dodging people. That's all it is for me now. About $1,560 I pay out of pocket every year just because I have to move my car, or else some Minnesotan isn't going to like it. $1,500 I have to pay for that reason. That's Minnesota nice, folks. I could have used that $1,500 for something else. And you know what? If I could have just left my car where it is instead of driving it all around like that, maybe many of those hours would have been transformed from unproductive hours into productive hours. The next category is water. When I was in my apartment, water was paid. I paid $0 for water. It's very difficult to estimate this one because it isn't so much water that I'm consuming at this point or using, but keep in mind, for me to use a toilet, I have to more or less rent it in many cases. And by that, what I mean is, if you're going into a store to use their bathroom, you feel a compulsion to buy something when you're there. I don't want to be some guy who just comes in and uses their toilet. So you feel a compulsion to buy something whether you need it or not. And I can't tell you how many times I bought a few bananas or an apple that ends up just rotting because it was basically rent for the toilet. But also I'm buying beverages. But when I was in the apartment, I did drink a lot of water. I drank a lot of coffee, but I drank a lot of water. But in the car, I have to focus on caffeinated beverages because I can't regulate my sleep properly. So I have to try to stay awake. Like I said, there's some nights I don't sleep at all. Well, how do you do that? You just consume a ton of caffeine. And that comes from things like energy drinks, which cost like $2 a piece. So I just did an estimate. I think this is probably low, but I would say on average about $3 a day that I pay today for what you might call water, for the things that water would have taken care of in my apartment. Bathing, showering, making noodles, anything. That comes out to about $800 a year, whereas I spent nothing when I was in the apartment. Next is car maintenance and car repairs, and again, good heavens, I don't even know how to begin with this one. I went back and forth on this a lot. When I was in the apartment, the car really didn't have many problems. I mean, yeah, it was a bit newer, but the thing was already a good, 12, 14 years old. So it wasn't a new car, but I maintained it, and the thing was, I didn't have to drive it in these ridiculous conditions. I didn't have to start the car 20 times a day like I do now, every single day. I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to run the car for 16 hours a day, which is a recipe for blowing a gasket and ruining your engine. I just drove to work, I drove to the store, I drove to see people, I drove to, do my thing. But when you're in the car, it's a whole nother story. That car is being run as much as a nuclear power plant, and the wear and tear on that has destroyed the car. So on average, given that I only had to replace my tires, maybe every couple years, if that, I don't even know if I had to do it that often. And I did regular maintenance on it. I did the oil changes and the tune-ups, and you have to fix something once in a while. I'm probably overestimating when I say $500 a year that I spent on that kind of thing when I lived in the apartment. Now, it's about $3,000 per year. Folks, I bought the car for $1,500. That's what I paid for it. Every year I pay twice as much as I paid for the car just to keep the thing running so I can go to work to earn the money so I can pay $8 for every productive hour of my life. Do you see the problem now? Do you start to see why being homeless is very, very, very expensive? Do you start to see why a homeless person does not have the easiest, doesn't have a good set of resources to work with when nobody around him will help him? And in fact, what they do instead is they exploit you, and they take advantage of you, and they profit from you. And yes, I'm talking about the government agencies and social services and the churches. Next up is food. And there's absolutely no way I could accurately estimate food. I mean, I do have records of my expenses more detailed somewhere when I was in the apartment. What I can say is this. When I was in the apartment, yes, I still mostly bought cheap food, but I also splurged a bit. I did buy beef. I did buy steak. Not all the time, but I did some amazing things even then with ramen noodles, with macaroni and cheese, which I haven't had in 6 years. I love macaroni and cheese. I haven't had it because I can't cook it. But the things that I ate, I made a lot of salads. A lot more fruits and vegetables. The food was, in a way, more expensive when you get into beef and meats and things like that, which I don't get at all now. But at the same time, I knew how to shop pretty smart, and I didn't mind going to the dollar store for that stuff. And, it's hard to say. But basically, I purchased food less frequently. I could just go and get the food I need for a week, And that was that. And I had the food I need for a week. Now I have to go out and get food almost every single day because I can't leave it in the car. What am I going to do? Leave it in the car when it's 120 degrees in the car? Am I going to leave it there when it's minus 20 degrees? I can't do that. I have to go out almost every day, and where do I have to shop? The only place that's open. Gas stations, convenience stores, places that cost 3 times as much as anywhere else. Or I get stiffed going to Cub Foods, which also costs as much as a gas station. Totally overpriced. The food I get today is uncooked. It ain't nutritious by any stretch of the imagination. I just feel weak all the time. I just feel lethargic. I know my body very well. Like I said, I haven't been sick in 30 years since I stopped going to doctors and I stopped taking vaccines. But that doesn't mean my body isn't suffering tremendously in these third world conditions. I don't have a way to estimate the difference in price with the food, but I wanted to go over this because the difference is there. I'm definitely spending more now than I did before, but I don't have a way to calculate how much. That's just the way it is. When I don't have a choice sometimes but to buy $2 for a beef jerky, when before I would have had something that came out on average to like 70 cents for a full meal, I'm spending a lot more. And instead of drinking water, I have to drink a $2.50 energy drink. Next, I just threw this in here just to kind of, not so much for the numbers, but to just show you there are so many of these things that people don't think about. What about coffee? I drink a lot of coffee. I have drank a lot of coffee since I was a young teenager. Maybe that's why I'm healthy. I don't know. In California, they say it causes cancer. But I don't have cancer, so I don't know, but that's California. As long as I don't go to California, I won't get cancer if I drink coffee, I guess. Coffee. When you buy a big tub of coffee and you make it with your own water, which was free in my apartment, I'm overestimating here now that I think of it, but I came up with 30 cents per cup. Whereas now, when I go to the gas station, what is it? It's $1.49, or if I get an extra large, it's $1.79, plus tax. Annually, what does that come out to? That means that annually, when I was in an apartment, I spent about $109 on coffee. Whereas now, I spend about $542. Folks, that's just coffee. That's just coffee. More than a $400 difference. And the only reason for it is because I don't have a home where I can make coffee cheaply. Alright, I'm going to show you this next section here. I'm going to talk about how much money I spend on mind-altering drugs. First up is alcohol. When I was in the apartment, I spent $0. Today, living in the car, I spent $0. Next is marijuana. Well, let's just go through the whole list. Meth, heroin, cocaine, crack, opiates, illegal pills, and then, of course, the legal pills, big pharmacy, pumping up even the children with their addictive drugs. Folks, I've never done any of that stuff. I didn't spend $1 on it when I lived in an apartment. I don't spend $1 on it today. The reason I put it in this chart is to remind you that the people who are spending all their money on that are Minnesota doctors, nurses, lawyers, paralegals, legislators' children in these high schools. It's the housed people who are spending all the money to keep these multi-billion-dollar drug cartels in business and to keep these multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies in business. It ain't the homeless people who's doing that, folks. They don't have multi-billion dollars to spend, in case you didn't notice. Maybe you haven't seen my chart. Homeless people don't have that kind of money to spend. By definition, all of those drugs and alcohol in the big picture, that's coming from housed people. And yet, what's the first thing out of people's mouths when you tell them you're homeless? First thing they're thinking in their mind is, oh, he must be a drug addict. Poor guy must be a drunk. Look at this chart, folks. In my entire life, I have spent, well, okay, I'll give you this. Up until I was about 23, I would have a beer occasionally. maybe, I don't know, I never liked alcohol. I never liked alcohol, but until I was about 23, I met a girl who was a recovering alcoholic, and I just saw what it had done to her, and I just never drank it again, never missed it. I don't like anything that messes with my mind. I like to use my mind. That's why I'm always productive. So let's add all this together. Let's add together, I brought back the annual rent plus the storage plus all of those expenses I just showed you. And what do you get? When I was in my apartment, those things costed around $12,000 a year. As I live in this car where I do not have a bathroom, I do not have a bathtub, I do not have a shower, I do not have closet space, I do not have carpet, I do not have windows that work, I do not have a kitchen, I do not have a bed, I do not have an office, I do not have a music studio, and I do not have my beloved pets anymore. I pay $23,095 a year. That's just to sustain myself, folks. Do you see the problem here yet? Because that big human rights attorney, the big-brained, brilliant professional Minnesotan, he came right out and said, as soon as he heard how much I made an hour, he shut me right down. Oh, that's plenty of money. You should have no problem. What's wrong with you? You're just lazy bum. Do you see the problem now, folks? Do you see the problem? It cost me almost twice as much as it did when I lived in an apartment, just to survive. And I don't get any of the benefits that I had living in the apartment. What should have been, if you ignored the fact that I had the torturous neighbors, what do you have? Your home is your castle. It was my office. It was my creative studio. It was my music studio. It was where I entertained friends. It was where I had pets that I loved dearly. It was where I played instruments and I got better and better at them. It's where it was my home base. It was my headquarters. It was my life. And I pay almost twice as much to sit in a car and sweat and freeze, and then to spend almost 2 days in a hotel being tortured by a bunch of junky drug addicts who just got out of prison, and the rudest hotel operators you've ever encountered in your life. When I checked in yesterday to this hotel, and don't forget, I've been in here for what now, 2.5, 3 years, almost every week. They know me well. The guy didn't talk to me the entire time. Just sat there with his mouth just clamped shut. From the moment I walked in, he handed me the paper. He didn't say a word. I came in and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he said nothing. This guy has a place to sleep at night. He's in the hospitality business. Remember, I used to run hotels on a national basis. I was the hotel's manager's boss. If I saw someone do that in a hotel, they would have been fired immediately. This guy lives here. This guy owns the place. This guy has a place to sleep every single night. And he didn't even talk to me. That's Minnesota nice, folks. And that's what I'm paying $23,000 a year for, is so I can be treated like that by some low-life hotel operator. Just fantastic. Now, with that information in mind, I've got some other things to talk about here. Understand that the numbers I just gave you are for somebody who is sane, sober, hardworking. All right? I do have a job and I do have a car. I get to sleep in the car. But consider those numbers. How are those numbers going to pan out for one of these poor people who doesn't have that? They don't have the job. Remember, when I didn't have the job, I was losing everything. I was 1 day away from losing everything, probably including my life, except for a miracle, but by the grace of Almighty God. But what about these people? They don't have a car to sleep in. They can't get a job because these osteophobic Minnesotans will not hire them. They can't get a job because this corrupt, incompetent, negligent government has made it illegal for homeless people to do anything that you do. Anything. It's illegal to get a driver's license. It's illegal to, without a resident address, you can't do any of this stuff. You can't file your taxes. You can't get a job. You can't get a stimulus check. You can't do anything. It's illegal. In fact, it's a felony. So if this is the situation I'm in when I am sane and sober and very hardworking and responsible, and I do have a vehicle, what do you think these people are doing? The next time you see those people out there, and I'm not talking about the person who's holding a sign at a street corner. Those people disgust me as much as they probably disgust you. And many of them are not even homeless. That's what's really sick about it. A lot of those people have a place to live, but they make more money going out there begging than they do at their job. In fact, when I ran a hotel in Salt Lake City, I had two employees that I inherited when I went in there. They were boyfriend and girlfriend. They would go down to the temple and beg as if they were homeless because they made more money there than they did from what I was paying them. I'm talking about real homeless people, not what you see on television, not what the Star Tribune lies about or the Pioneer Press lies about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real human beings who are just like you, but they don't have a home. And I'm trying to talk about them before they become so despairing and despondent that they do crawl into a bottle or grab a needle. Because nobody's helping these people when they needed the help. Remember all my videos when I tell you about what happened with me. I had a couple of years before I lost my home where I asked everybody to help me, including the people who were paid to do so, to enforce laws and things. They all refused to do it. There's no excuse for me having lost my home in the first place. The employer I worked for, who was so sleazy that they just fired all those people reorganizing the place with no advance notice whatsoever, came at the wrong time for me, folks. But a lot of people, when they lose their job, they lose their home. Were they really bad people? Were they really just a bunch of junkies, lazy bums? Or did they have a job that they lost through no fault of theirs? Because some corporate executive wanted to increase the size of his golden parachute. Like the medical company I worked for before. That sleazy, sick, and disgusting medical company who claims to care something about people's health, and yet they threw me into this situation where I've never been less healthy. Are the homeless really that bad, or do these numbers start to give you some inkling of what's going on? Another factor here is that I don't have any family. And I was in Minnesota, so you're not going to say I have any good friends who are going to help at that level. But I don't have any family, and a lot of these people don't. What have you done when you have a problem? When something goes wrong, who do you call? You call your friends and your family, and they usually help you. There are some families out there I have seen that even when someone does something just mind-bogglingly stupid, their families stand by them and they help them. I've seen families mortgage their houses to help their children or to help their parents. I didn't have that. It was just me. It was me and my job at that medical company, and those sleazebags at that medical company dumped me onto the street right at the very moment when I was struggling to try to survive in that apartment where I could only spend my days laying on the floor curled up in the fetal position because my neighbors were torturing and terrorizing me. You see, there's a reason why each person becomes homeless. That's my story, but every one of these people has another story, totally unique. Divorce causes homelessness, not just for women. Men get screwed in these divorces. It's men and women and children. Natural disasters. Do you remember with Katrina, with Ida here? Do you know how many people become homeless because of those? Do you have any idea? Because they don't show you in the Star Tribune. They'll put a little headline about it. They'll mention it in a sentence or two, but they don't see it through because they don't care. But there are real human beings by the hundreds and by the thousands who lost their homes. Where are they sleeping tonight? Do you think somebody's out there taking care of them? No. they've got the same thing to go to that I had to go to, which is corrupt government and social services, which doesn't care whether they live or die. There's individuals who do have a good heart. I'm not saying there aren't. But as an institution, they're not set up to help people. And if you don't help them quickly when they become homeless, or like I was begging people to help me before I became homeless, but nobody would do it. Not in Minnesota. Not even the ones paid to do it, like legislators, police, city councils, attorney generals, governors. They wouldn't do anything. Like this lunatic Angie Craig, this U.S. representative from this district, who I went to for help when Governor Walz cost me, and only me out of my entire office, my job, with a stay-at-home order because I'm the only one who didn't have a home to stay in. So I'm the only one who lost my job. So I go to Angie Craig for help, and what do I get? Nothing. I get no response, and that woman is still, a year and a half later, sending me all these emails on her mailing list, begging me to help her. And then you go on YouTube and you see all these ads coming up where she created some front group that makes it look like she's got a bunch of people out there saying, "Thank you, Angie, for putting Minnesota first." When all she's doing is building a power base with a lobbyist who will fill her pockets with cash in Washington. That's the kind of scum and sleaze that all these people in these natural disasters have to go to for help. And if they don't get it within a couple of weeks, they are in peril of becoming homeless forever. That's what those teenagers who are leaving an abusive family because they have to survive, when they only have several weeks to get some help before some nice, kind drug dealer offers to help them. And then you wonder why there's a tent city in Los Angeles or San Francisco or Minneapolis, where all these wonderful house people keep getting together trying to get the police to go in and break up those tent cities because they don't live in enough misery and suffering. They need to live in an even greater hell just so those wonderful housed Minnesotans will feel more comfortable. Do you see what I'm talking about here, folks? The reason I gave you these numbers is to give you some idea of what's really going on here. These are the numbers for someone who does work for a living, who has a car to drive and to live in. Most homeless people don't have that. What are they going to do? They would have lost their storage and never seen the things they had to remember their families with ever again. That would break my heart if I lost that. That was the first 40 years of my life. Every single thing I have to remember that by is in California. And I'm fighting tooth and nail to get that back someday so I can see a picture of my mother again. And that creepy attorney, human rights attorney, after 2 or 3 minutes of listening to me talk without even investigating anything in these charts, tells me that I make plenty of money, I shouldn't have any problem, I shouldn't be homeless. Folks, this is the sickness we're dealing with. It isn't homeless people who are sick, it is housed people. It is housed people. In the 6 years I've been homeless out here, I have seen homeless people do drugs once, and I'll be the first to admit, yes, there are a lot of homeless people out there who drink and who do drugs, yes. But as far as me interacting with them, going in the shelters and the social services early on, I only saw it happen once, and it was at a church that was holding a shelter. Some of them went out, they were smoking pot in the car. Since then, I have seen more than I can count or remember or calculate selling, buying, and doing drugs in public, specifically in their cars, in public parks. I've learned how they do it. I can identify by just the way a car drives into a park. I can tell with about 80% accuracy that person's going to park. They're not going to sit there and stare at a phone. They're going to jostle around a bit. They're going to look down, in the direction of their elbow. And they're going to be there for about 4 or 5 minutes. Then they're going to kind of kick back, maybe cough a bit, then they're going to pack up, and in that intoxicated state, they're going to drive away. And the people I'm seeing doing that are lawyers and doctors and nurses, professionals. The same people who go to the Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press and say that it's homeless people who are all the drug addicts. And don't forget, Governor Tim Walz seemed to think that taking away my job and my income was less harmful than coronavirus. Seeing the numbers that you just saw there, what do you think about that, folks? Do you think that taking away my job and my income was less harmful than coronavirus for somebody who hasn't been sick in 30 years? Right now, Joe Biden seems to think that taking away my job and my income is less harmful than coronavirus, a virus that has more than a 99% survival rate if you get it. But I don't get these diseases, do I? I could. I'm not saying I'm immune to it, but I know how to take care of myself. I stopped going to the doctors, the ones who sit in the park and shoot up heroin. Those doctors, the ones who hand out all those pharmaceuticals to these kids at the high school so they can sell them to their friends. The doctors and nurses who are doing that right here in Minnesota. I stopped going to those people. That's why I don't get sick. And by the grace of Almighty God. But Joe Biden thinks that taking away my income if I don't get a vaccine, when the last time I got a vaccine, I got sick. So I don't want another vaccine because I don't get sick. He thinks that's less harmful than coronavirus. What do you think, folks, after seeing those numbers in that chart? Do you think Joe Biden is right? Or do you think he is bat guano crazy or evil? What about all these Christian churches in Minnesota? Remember, I went to more than 100 churches. Every single one of them blew me off. If I emailed them or wrote to them, they didn't even respond. That one pastor, when I told her how dire my situation was when I was trying to not become homeless, and she said, maybe we'll see your stuff on Storage Wars. Maybe that's the reason these people are homeless. Maybe because that's what they have to go to for help. Maybe that's why they're homeless. And what about this Minnesota human rights attorney? This guy, there's those things in your life that happen that you will just never forget. If I had been raped as a child, that's what I feel like after talking to this piece of human garbage attorney who didn't bother to discover. I don't know if he knows what that word means. It has a meaning in the legal system. But if he had bothered to discover any facts instead of his visceral prejudice, bias, bigotry against homeless people, he might have figured out that I was calling him for help. But he didn't help me. All he did was ream me as if I had been raped. That's Minnesota's idea of a human rights attorney. I want to thank you very much for sitting through this video where it's mostly audio. I sure hope you got out of it what I intended you to get out of it. I put a lot of time into that chart. I did everything I could to make those numbers as accurate as possible. I think in the big picture, I think those are very good numbers for my situation, but it's different for every person out there. And I hope this helps you understand a little bit more about why these people are homeless. Yeah, some of them are just lazy bums. Some of them were drug addicts before. Yeah, you're right. But not all of them. I would dare say not most of them. There's a plethora of reasons why people become homeless. Natural disaster, divorce, leaving an abusive spouse or abusive parents, fire, neighbors who torture and torment them day and night for years while nobody will help them. There's a whole bunch of reasons, folks, and I hope you'll think about that, and I hope it'll inspire you to try to do something about it. Thanks again so much for watching, everyone. Next time you'll have to look at my face again, and I apologize for that. But until then, Y'all take care.